So what color goes next, kids? Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today. And for this video, we're going to be doing another round of rating my shelves. Alright, so if you're new here, this video project is one in which I'm trying to focus on reading off my owned TBR, except I gamified it this year to make it a little bit more of a challenge, but also to kind of really encourage myself to focus on this goal. And so we're starting each video with me pulling a prompt from my TBR jar to see what books am I going to be reading under a certain prompt. Then we're going to use a random number generator to figure out how many books will I be reading that match said prompt. Let's just go ahead and dive in because this part always makes me nervous, though the random number generator makes me more nervous. Let's see what we're reading today. Rainbow colors. Okay, so this one's fun. So I have to take the majority color of the last book I finished and follow the rainbow pattern from there. So this will be fun. How many books will I be reading? I'm so glad you asked. 6, apparently. So the last book I finished was Queen's Peril by E.K. Johnston for my Star Wars canon project, and I would say the majority cover on this is like a blue-purple hue, and then I mean the spine is purple, so we're gonna say purple. So circling back to the top, we gotta find a book that's red. We're gonna start things off with A Fire Endless by Rebecca Ross. Yes, like majority is black. Red is the next majority color. I read the first book of this one for my last Raid My Shelves, so this way I can continue with the series. Good job team. So next we need a orange cover. I don't have a ton of options, so it looks like I'm going to be going with Love at First Set by Jennifer Dugan. This is a sapphic romance story. Pretty different from the last choice. I'm going to give myself a little leeway with this one because I don't really have that many yellow books. It's more the spine or the font is yellow, so I'm going to say Last to Leave the Room by Caitlin Starling because I also need to read this one. It is my oldest or second oldest book from Evernight. This will finally push me to read it, and I mean, it's got a fair amount of yellow on there. So what color goes next, kids? That's right, green. Good job. For green, I'm gonna go with Women and Other Monsters by Jess Zimmerman because I need to double up a little bit and read this for another video that's coming up here soon. But also I've just been really wanting to get to it. It's been on like my hopefully getting added to a TBR here soon list. This is a nonfiction book that's diving into the discussions around monstrous female characters from folklore and myths. So next we have blue. And I do have a good few options for that one, thankfully. I think for that one, I'm going to go with Blackheart Man by Nalo Hopkinson. I received an ARC of this from Saga Press. Thank you to them. I'm really excited. I still have not heard too many people talk about this one, so I'm going to be going into it with pretty limited expectations, and that's always what I prefer, honestly. That usually means I will enjoy the book a little bit more. So we're on to the last one, which would be Indigo. Yeah, I think we're going to go with this one. After Hours on Milagro Street by Angelina M. Lopez. This is the first in her romance series, and that works out perfectly because I read the second book in the series. So that'll catch me up for the time being. And I also really enjoyed the character work around the first book I read by her, so excited to see more. So on that note, we got our next 6 books picked. I will talk to y'all again when I've started into one of them. Hey y'all, so I've hit the halfway point into A Fire Endless, and okay, when I first started this book, I will be honest, it was not going super hot. At the beginning, this was really slow. But to be fair, where the first book closed out, I understood how Ross ended things and the way that was supposed to drag you back in for the sequel. But to me, it really was not that intriguing because majority of the reason I loved the first book so much was really due to the side characters, Sidra and Torin. The first book closes out in a way where the focus is very much on Adira and Jack. So going into this one, I wasn't super excited, I'll be honest. And probably for the first 150 pages, this was really slow. I was kind of having to, maybe not force, but I was having to put a little bit more effort into picking this book up and continuing on with it. Now, at the halfway point, I'm realizing I should not have doubted Rebecca Ross because, oh my gosh, y'all. The last chapter I read so fervently. I was so engrossed. Part of it I was listening to while driving home, and I was like yelling, screaming at the audiobook from nerves and excitement and happiness. I nearly teared up, like, oh my gosh. I just felt so many emotions in that last chapter, and that chapter was focused on Adira and Jack. I'm still not so taken away with their romance. I don't feel nearly as strong for it as I do for that of Torin and Sidra. The events that were going on were so heart-racing. The things that were happening that were kind of drawing these two together, you can't help it. You have to root for them. You want to see them make this work. and it was so good. It was so good. As for 𝗖mě and 𝗁, I also think Ross has presented a element through those two is going to start driving the plot a little bit more. Does have me very intrigued as to what's going to happen next. So nervous, but so happy for them, but also because of current circumstances, like again, I'm so nervous and I'm so worried. So the first half of this book has really been a roller coaster ride. I'm much more invested. I am much more engaged. I am filming this update so that I can keep reading this book. I'm here for this. Even though it took some time to build up, I do feel like there's a bit more excitement in this book than there was in the first. I feel like the first was even slower moving, which is funny to say because like Rebecca Ross's stuff is slow paced. It is slow moving. She does take a lot of time to build up the stories. This one does feel a hair faster. It feels like we're getting more action than we really were in the first one. It was as though the first book had more investigation going on, but like now we're getting actual action. I'm glad I actually ended up utilizing this book for this video, so it did kind of force me to continue this series and stay on top of it. I should not have doubted Rebecca Ross. Hey y'all, so I've officially finished out A Fire Endless, and okay, I actually really ended up loving this. It's so funny that I remember how I was feeling at the start, and I think it really showcases like how much a slump can affect your reading enjoyment. Yes, this did start out slow, but I think my slump mood was really affecting my enjoyment because man, once I was over that and continued reading, I really did get invested into the story so quickly. Ross had me glued to the page the entire way through. It was really good. I once again believe that Ross's character work is definitely a big part of why I ended up loving this so much. I adored 𝗖mě and 𝗁 in the first book, and I'm very surprised to say that Jack and Adira's relationship actually felt like the one that had me coming back a lot more in this book, possibly because they spend more time, initially I would say longing and like pining for one another. We actually get to see more of them together in a couple scenario, unlike in the first book. Whereas in the first book, we spend a lot of time with 𝗖mě and 𝗁, but those two unfortunately are separated for a lot of the events in this one. Also with Jack and Adira's perspectives, we had letter writing, and I always enjoy that in a romance. I know Rebecca Ross can pull that off so well. In fact, I actually wish she would have used it a little bit more because she just does it so well. But even without that, I mean, her romantic lines are just some very phenomenal writing. They are heartwarming, they are breathtaking. She is truly so good at what she does. I still did love 𝗖mě and 𝗁. I love their relationship. I love the developments that happen in this book with their relationship. And I thought the way that their roles kind of got reversed a little bit from how they are in the first book was very interesting. Like a parallel of that in another side couple that is introduced in this book. I think I also mentioned in my prior update that the events of this book also felt like they were a little bit more exciting than the prior book. I think with the folk being a lot more involved, and then with the implications of what was going on affecting both sides of the aisle, it just felt like the stakes in this were a lot higher. And the investigating for different solutions for each of the problems they encountered felt like they developed a lot faster, and we were able to get maybe not full answers, but like a little bit of answers, which would take us to the next step. Like kind of what happened in the first book, but I felt like it dragged out longer in the first book in comparison to this one. And then finally, Ross's writing truly does just transport you into the setting. She is so talented at atmosphere work as well. The whimsical folklore feel of the book and the universe here is just so well done. She really weaves it into every element of the story, and that's so impressive. By the end of this book, I was reminded that Ross just absolutely kills it, and her stories really do tie into so many things that I love in writing. Like I said, it started a little slow, so I'm gonna put it at like a 4.5 stars. This is also one of those where like I would not be surprised that if I reread it, I ended up bumping it to a 5-star. Also, this allowed me to finish out a series. So once again, shout out to Past Nat for putting this on this TBR. Hello, my loves. So I've hit the halfway, well, actually, no, I have definitely surpassed the halfway point into Love at First Set. And let me start off by saying the setup of this book should not be so enjoyable for me because there's so much drama that's really just based upon incorrect assumptions and miscommunication. This feels like I'm watching an arc going on throughout a TV show like Friends or How I Met Your Mother.
I might know something.
I might know something too.
What's the thing you know?
Oh, no, I can't tell you, and you tell me what you know.
Well, I can't tell you what I know.
Well, then I can't tell you what I know.
Okay, fine.
Where it's so ridiculous. It's so sitcom-y, rom-com-esque, but I'm pretty strapped in, I'm not gonna lie. It's funny to me because the struggling relationship between Kara and James feels like it should be driving me insane, but actually, I'm really liking how that's working out, and that's keeping me intrigued, keeping me amused enough but not quite frustrated, whereas the miscommunication that is happening between Kara and Lizzie, that was starting to push a little too far for me. They keep stumbling into these situations where they're not quite lying to each other, but like they're not quite being honest either, and it's just this constant like just be honest, just talk to them. But I'm still here for it. I'm still having a really good time. I don't want to quit listening to this audiobook because it's ridiculous, but it's entertaining. I like Lizzie, but at the same time, you can tell with the background we've gotten around her that she definitely has some codependency issues. She probably needs to be getting more therapy than she can currently afford. She lets these people walk all over her. Like, I will be honest, I don't love James or Kara that much. I don't even particularly love this romance. Like, I don't know if this author is really gonna sell me on love by the end of the book, but at this point, I'm willing to be here for two people trying to figure shit out and doing that together maybe. So if I finish this book and we are having grand love declaration, I'll probably have some issues. But if it's just the two of them trying to figure out how to make a relationship work with all of their baggage, I would definitely be pleased with that solution to the story. While I am screaming at everyone to just talk to each other, to be honest, to tell this person like whatever it is they need to get off their chest, even still, like, I don't want to stop reading. It's ridiculous. And I think if this book was like 50 pages longer, it probably would feel like it's being dragged out for way too long. Even now, like, I'm still not worn out by it yet. Like, I was just starting to reach that point with the romance. Like, thankfully, Dugan finally had them talk things out. There have been a few moments that do feel like they're very stereotypical rom-com, but I don't even really mind that because, again, I'm just having a really fun time. So this is going really great, and I'm very intrigued to see how this author rounds things out and whether or not she will manage to stay in my good graces or officially drive me crazy. Hey y'all, so I have officially finished out Love at First Sight, and I did like this. Didn't really change too much from the halfway point. It's very sitcom-y, it's entertaining, it's very comedic. Cora and James are kind of terrible people, and I really was here for the moment when Lizzie finally snaps and kind of calls everybody out on their bullshit. Lizzie herself needed to work on some stuff. Her constant self-sabotaging was very frustrating. I still was never sold on like these two being in love. I think by the end of the book, I could be sold on them managing to try and figure out a relationship and dealing with each of their baggage and how that's going to affect their relationship. But love? Not quite. And because of that, the ending just seemed so unrealistic. I mean, these two literally are the stereotype of U-hauling lesbians. Like, they take that turn so fast, and it just didn't feel warranted. It did not make sense to me. I don't think they could have lasted if they did that. I don't even really think that when it comes to the epilogue that they would be ready to get married in a year. These two had so much stuff they needed to work on first. This was very much a fun romance, even though there is a lot of lying and withholding of truth. I think the reason it didn't bug me so much is because it's very played up for the comedic effect, and nobody ever has ill intentions, even though it's still not healthy. Like, it's still big red flags. At the very least, everybody in the story wanted, well, okay, not everybody in the story. The main couple always had pure intentions towards one another, so I liked that at the very least. There was a little bit of spice. It wasn't especially steamy though. Not the best romance I ever read, but I had a fun time with it. This is definitely a book that if you like drama, I would recommend it to you. I don't know if I would ever reread this, honestly. It's one of those where, like, I'm very back and forth on whether I'm going to keep this book or not. Hey guys, so I've hit the halfway point into Less to Leave the Room, and honestly I went into this with really low expectations because I've heard pretty much only negative and like maybe middling reviews on it. Not too long and I could kind of understand why, because the writing style is definitely not for me. It reminds me of Andy Weir's in that, like, yes, this has science fiction elements, but it feels like the writing gets a little bit bogged down in all of the scientific jargon. There's a lot of discussion around like taking observations, analyzing data, and then also performing these experiments. But at the very least, I will say in Project Hail Mary, at least the experiments were kind of fun. This one,
not really at all. It makes the story feel pretty dry, and also the pacing is definitely kind of dragging a little bit. That said, I am starting to get invested into like the psychological thriller elements. There is some suspense going on, and it does pull me to the edge of my seat. I have been unsettled a time or two while reading this, and I also think it's interesting how Starling is presenting the main character Tamsin, because she's not likable. Like, I do not like this woman. I'm kind of forced into rooting for her because I too want to know what the heck is going on. Like, what is causing 𝗖cie to be sinking? What's causing this difference in her house versus the rest of the city? Where'd this freaking door come from? Why is the doppelganger here? I too just want to know what the is going on. There's a few times where like a softer side is shown in Tamsin's character, but as we continue, we also are kind of getting to see how she is losing herself in her work a bit too much, and how that's kind of starting to present in her losing her grip a little bit. Is that actually what's happening, or is somebody pulling the strings and kind of leading her in this direction, making her feel this way? Is this like some really elaborate form of gaslighting that's going on? Like I said, I do think it's building suspense well. It's just the writing of everything else is not my favorite, so it's making it feel like it's dragging. I wish it was moving a little bit faster, or at the very least, like if the writing was doing a little bit more and maybe getting me more engaged with Tamsin's character. She interacts with other characters. Like, we have seen she has dynamics with some of them, but like none of them, barring one, are particularly interesting. And ignoring that one, the only other possible thing is like dynamic with herself, which I guess, yes, is kind of interesting, but it's also kind of weird. I don't know, it's kind of like watching Beth and Space Beth just like hanging out in the house.
Sorry for the sitcom fight and maybe getting us digested. You've got incredible timing.
That's not super interesting. I think going in with lower expectations did work out in my favor, because it means I'm having a okay time with this. I'm still not really loving it. I am still nervous that I probably will end up getting rid of it, which is such a shame because it's a very pretty book and I like the creepy cat on the cover.
Hey y'all, so I've officially finished out Last to Leave the Room, and well, the first half of this book was a slog, I'll say it. By the midway point, I was getting more engaged, I was more intrigued, and I also think part of that is because the writing style shifted away from this very heavy science jargon to more colloquial, I don't know, like normal talking. So I didn't feel so lost all the time. I didn't feel like the writing itself was getting bogged down with all of these big words being tossed around. And also, I think the setup of the city sinking is pretty unnecessary to the plot overall. But also around the halfway point is when like the scarier stuff started to kick in, so of course that also engaged me. Some of the twists in this I did find predictable, but even with that, I did also enjoy watching them play out. Just certain turns in the story that felt very convenient and nonsensical for Tamsin to like either believe these things or not ask certain questions or not take a more logical step, because you just spent like half of the book convincing us that she is so smart, she is brilliant, yada, yada, yada. And yet she makes so many dumb decisions. I did like the philosophical questions that were raised in this when it comes to like identity, what makes us us. I also feel like Starling didn't really utilize those as much as she probably could have. Then there was this unexpected sort of, I'm gonna say very, very light romance that I wasn't expecting. I wasn't 100% behind, but I also kind of liked it. There were elements of it that I enjoyed. The end, though, sort of lackluster. And I do think part of that also comes down to the fact that I was getting really tired of Tamsin making stupid decisions. That said, though, I did enjoy this more than I thought I would. Honestly, I did go into it with really, really low expectations. But like I said, I also think that if the whole sinking of the city element had been removed, if Tamsin had some other crisis at her job, was still requiring her to work a lot, but we just didn't get nearly as much time dedicated to it, we didn't get nearly as many details, I think that would have been so much better. I think it would have helped with the pacing of the story. I think it would have allowed us to spend more time on the actual interesting parts of it, and it would have made it a quicker and much more consumable story. So in the end, this was like a 3-star for me, honestly. Even though I do really like the cover of this, unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be keeping this one. I probably will be putting it up on my Pango because I just don't really see myself ever rereading it. Hey guys, so I actually ended up making the decision that I was going to change out what book I am going with for the green on this video. Initially, I chose Women and Other Monsters, but I realized after the fact, like I was utilizing that for my feminist reading vlog, and I talked about that book a lot in that vlog. If you're interested for thoughts on it still, I'll put a link to that in the cards if you somehow missed it. But because I talked about it so much in that one, it felt a little repetitive to have it in this vlog as well, where it's another dedicated reading video. Luckily, I had another green book that I needed to read here soon, specifically for the end of my 2024 Reddit Fantasy Bingo board. To officially close out that board, I needed to read An Orc on the Wild Side by Tom Holt. This was to fulfill the prompt of orcs, trolls, goblins, oh my. Hard mode was if the main character falls into one of those categories. This actually has a lot broader plot than I went into it expecting. I thought this was going to be following King Mordack, who is the new Prince of Evil, and he is kind of trying to modernize the goblin community a little bit with like a very human contemporary mindset. So I thought it was going to be really about that and very entertaining, which it is when it comes to King Mordack's storyline. However, this is like a weird mix of Lord of the Rings meets Everything Everywhere All at Once, and then Snow White all put together. And so we have multiple different plot lines that are taking place, and there's threads that connect each of them. Overall, it's not quite exactly what I went into it wanting. One of the major main characters, King Mordack, like I said, newest Prince of Evil, he is kind of trying to shift the way the goblins live their lives in order to extend their life expectancy, in order to hopefully make them stronger, in order to improve everyone's way of life. But because it's so different from what they know, like he is still kind of getting some pushback. It's so weird. And then like King Mordack's assistant is an elf who thinks goblins are idiots, but at the same time, like they're kind of improving relationships between the goblins and the elves by having this connection. Then he's also trying to stop them from going to war with the dwarves, which on that note, we also have the Snow White-esque character who it seems like is a normal human who came from a contemporary world through a alternate reality device that is essentially any sort of hollow food, like a donut. And so she is kind of trying to improve her standing with the dwarves, showcasing to them stuff from her world or our world, and like by being the middleman of selling all of this random crap that's like rejections from our world to this fantastical world, because the fantasy characters here, they've never been exposed to this stuff, so like they're fascinated by it and willing to pay for it because it's something different and weird, and she tells them how it's going to improve their life. It's so strange. It is so weird. Then we also have this human couple who seems very normal and have recently purchased a home in this fantasy land, and they are trying to live like their everyday life, but keep running into weird issues because they're in a fantasy land. I don't think I especially love the writing style in it because I don't feel incredibly invested in any specific character, but across the board, I am so intrigued just watching these scenarios play out because it's pretty unique, I gotta say. And I'm so interested to see how these little threads that connect each of these stories are eventually going to come together for some sort of a actual like satisfying conclusion. It's a weird book. It is a weird time. It definitely is like combo fantasy with like some absurdist humor. I think there's like certain people that this just would work very well for. I'm not gonna say this is like making me laugh out loud or crack up constantly. Definitely entertaining. Hey guys, so I actually filmed this update previously, but apparently something happened with audio on my mic and it got messed up. Here I am again to tell you that I finished out An Orc on the Wild Side by Tom Holt for my green book of this project, and I liked this, but it was so weird. Silly, fun fantasy read that I really think is perfect for fans of classic fantasy, so you can kind of get a spoof on it that has a absurdist humor twist. This is unlike any other thing I've read before, but I think that's because I've never really delved into spoofs or parodies of other fantasy books. And off of this, I do think I would enjoy them. Like maybe I should be picking those up. Another big one that comes to mind is like Red Shirts by John 𝗖cie, which is obviously supposed to be a spoof on Star Trek. I think that would be really entertaining. So as I said before, this is like Lord of the Rings meets Everything Everywhere All at Once. Sprinkle in a little Snow White within there, and then some fraud, gentrification. It was so strange, but I was completely glued in while I was reading it. I wouldn't say any of the characters in this book were like my favorites. I wasn't especially attached to any of them or super invested in any of them. I liked each of them enough, and there was enough there within the plot to keep me intrigued and keep me coming back, curious to figure out like how were all of these characters going to eventually come together to figure out a solution to what the heck is happening. And with that, I do think Holt actually did a really great job of giving you little lines between each of the stories and then tying them together at the end. I will say though, given the story this is based on, I expected the climax of the book to be a little bit more exciting, to have a little bit more fighting, a little bit more bloodshed. The way it wraps up also does feel very appropriate for the rest of the book. Like it matches with the overall tone of the story on the whole. I can't be too mad about it. I would say though, if I had to call out any characters by name as my favorites, I did very much enjoy John the lawyer / liar, and then also King Mordack along with his elvish assistant. Those two were really funny. Very strong 4-star. It kept my attention. It kept me entertained anytime I was reading it. I don't necessarily know if I would ever reread it though. Hey guys, so I have slightly surpassed the halfway point into Blackheart Man by Nalo Hopkinson. Part of that is because the halfway point was not an easy place to stop off at, but also part of it was because I was very intrigued to see whether or not this book was going to manage to recapture my attention. And unfortunately, it did not do that. Has a lot going on in it, honestly. And I feel like the best part of the book, the best part of Hopkinson's writing really comes down to the world building. Her world building is really incredible. I mean, it is very detailed. You can tell she thought out like every tiny little thing that goes on in this world to distinguish it. And I think that's really great, but that alone is not enough to keep me invested into a story. And unfortunately, it's the characters and the plot that are really letting this down for me. So we have our main character, 𝗖cie, who has a lot going on right now, but he also is not particularly likable, which isn't necessarily a problem for me, but I also just had a very difficult time rooting for him because he is the cause of majority of his own problems, and he does not take any responsibility to really rectify that. I don't think he's inherently a bad guy, but he's so infuriating to read. I think the most positive I felt toward him was in regard to his relationship with his future stepdaughter. They actually seemed like they had a pretty good relationship, but not really paternal, more like he was the fun uncle sort of way. Apart from that, he actually kind of comes across like a pothead. It's such a funny thing to say in this very fantastical world, but he does have a slight reliance on this drug that is utilized during like a spiritual situation, kind of reminiscent of like peyote, but a little bit more toned down, and he'll just like pop it in like it's tobacco and walk around with it, just slightly skewing his day. He takes no responsibility for anything he ever does. He constantly is getting himself and others into trouble, doesn't really see the issue in that, and he just doesn't really take anything seriously. It was just really frustrating to read about this guy who is so immature when he's like about to get married and become a parent and is supposed to be pretty high up when it comes to their society because of his role as this like musician / historian. And at no point did it feel like he was growing throughout the events we were watching unfold. It really more felt like everybody was forgiving him and he just kind of kept going along with the same attitudes, same mindset. So nothing was changing. Like I said, the world was pretty cool, and I did find out from looking at other reviewers that apparently there is some basis from Caribbean culture. So that was really interesting to learn. The world itself is also queer normative. So 𝗖cie is going to be marrying a woman here soon, but he also has a partner husband. However, they don't really have like a polycule relationship sort of thing. It's more like his wife is going to be a bigamist because his partner husband is more like his best friend. But it is mentioned that there are some triad couples where like it is more of a polycule, but I felt like we weren't actually seeing enough of his relationship to get a good feel for the dynamic that he has with them or really get me invested into their relationship. In fact, it didn't seem like he really cared that much about their relationship, so I didn't understand why I should. In fact, he actually starts up a friendship with this other woman who is a mermeki, which is kind of considered like a lower race in their society, which we're going to come back to that. He gets accused by multiple people in his life of having a new romantic partner because of how he acts towards her. It felt really weird to me that the start of this book has him going to be marrying these two people, and then you introduce like another love interest character. That was just so odd. Rounding back to this woman who is Mermeki. So it was very cool to learn about this world and see how it sort of has some elements that feel more old school, feel more historical, but there are other parts where it's like almost more futuristic. Their culture is more refined and like very forward thinking, but then at the same time they still have systematic racism and sexism. I enjoyed seeing 𝗖cie perspective on things kind of shift and bonding with his friend trying to figure out how to make changes. I liked all of that, but it also strangely didn't feel like it was really important to majority of the plot for how much page time was dedicated to it. Even though there was so much going on, I really felt like this just sort of was us watching 𝗖cie living his everyday life while all these exciting and terrifying things are like happening around him, but he isn't really having any impact on them. There was too much going on for everything to be squashed into this small amount of pages and to actually see everything resolved in a satisfying way by the end, but I also just wasn't invested because of how everything was being laid out. Very, very conflicting feelings about this book. I wanted to like this, but I just was not invested anymore, and I found myself tuning out when listening to the audiobook more often than not, and that just tells me I need to give up. I need to put it down. Hey y'all, so I've hit the halfway point into After Hours on Milagro Street. Guys, this is really good. It's really good. I'm really enjoying this. It starts off so insta-lusty because Alex ends up basically stumbling upon Jeremiah when she moves back home and is trying to stay at one of the tenants' apartments above her grandmother's bar, and she's needing to let off some steam. Jeremiah, hot, hunky, all right? Let's go. But once the actual setup of the story starts going, there is this sort of enemies to lovers thing because she sees him as a threat. She is jealous of the relationship he has developed with her family because she has taken the last 13 years to really distance herself from them. And part of me is very empathetic towards Alex. Like, I can't deny I hold a good grudge. So there's certain times where I'm furious on Alex's behalf. But then it's so interesting to see how Lopez keeps shifting the dynamic that she has with her family members to change the perspective and showcase to Alex like things aren't exactly what she sees. And I think the way Lopez is doing it so far is so good because it's allowing Alex to mature as a character. Having read the second book already, there's also certain circumstances that I already know the opposite side of, namely with her sister Jillian, but that really isn't being talked about too much just yet. And kind of the same thing with Jeremiah. Like, she has this initial perspective on him that the more she learns about him, the more she interacts with him, that changes. It's very clear there is something in his past that he is hiding. I hate that. I hate when a character knows something and they keep it from us as the audience, but he has spent so many years repressing this, altering his entire life to change. It kind of makes sense he wouldn't actively be thinking about it. He would do everything in his ability to repress it. It's frustrating, but like, again, I think Lopez is presenting it in a way that makes sense and is logical. The paranormal element in the story is pretty minimal. Basically, they both believe that the bar itself is haunted. Since I've read the second book, I know that the paranormal element isn't just in their heads. It is actually a part of the story, but it's just not as forward as things were with that in the second book. Now we're starting to dive into almost more of a mystery where the two of them are working together to try and save Loretta's bar from this yuppie bigwig who is wanting to swoop in and buy it, probably in order to build a plant in this side of the town and effectively drive all of the people who live there out. There's lots of discussions in this around Mexican Americans living in Midwestern towns, the way their culture has set up in those towns and how it has changed because of where they live, but also along with that, gentrification. I mean, there's definitely microaggressions and little bits of racism woven throughout the story as well. Jeremiah does come across as somebody who is infuriated by racism and clearly does not agree with it, but he hasn't fallen into the trap of feeling like a white savior. Like, he realizes Alex can stand up for herself. She can take care of herself. There's a great line where it said something to the effect of, she has felt every emotion under the sun when it comes to experiencing racism. And by this point, she's kind of just tired. But y'all, the romance in this, I was worried with how things started out. I don't love insta-lust. I don't love insta-love. But like, we had that moment which gave us some spice and now has ramped up the tension between the two of them, especially since they don't like each other and are slowly sort of becoming friends/partners. There's another moment of anger that boils over into sexual tension. And oh, it was so good. I'm not the biggest fan of some of the terminology Lopez uses in her spicy scenes. I'm not gonna lie. But overall feeling, freaking delicious. I'm talking 4 chilies. This was nice and hot. And now I really like the shift in their relationship that's happened where like they're doing their best to stop the hormones from fueling some of their interactions and try to maybe not be friends, but at least be colleagues, be able to work together to figure out this situation so they can take care of Loretta and her bar. Guys, this is going so good. It's so good. Like I am filming this update because I need to keep reading. Hey y'all, so I've officially finished out After Hours on Milagro Street. I really liked this. I can pick out issues I had with this book here and there, but like overall, I just had a very phenomenal time reading this book. After having read this one and the second in the series, I can say it is very clear Lopez really enjoys writing unlikable female characters. Even though I did not always like Alex, I always rooted for her. I wanted her to win. She might have driven me crazy at times. There might have been moments where I didn't feel like she was the victim. Like I did not think she was in the right based on what she was saying or like how we were seeing things from other characters' perspectives. However, it was so hard to not root for her, to not enjoy watching her story play out. I never felt like she was the bad guy. I still wanted to see her figure things out in the end. And that's so impressive. I really like the arc that she went on throughout this story. But that being said, I also wish we would have seen a little bit more of the aftermath where she finally has her light bulb moment, her realization and starts to turn things around. I wish we had more time with that Alex, just to really appreciate how far she has come from the character we meet at the very start of the book. But she's angry, she is loud, she is strong, she is terrified, she loves so fiercely. She was a really great character. This is the kind of character I enjoy reading about. Then on the other side with Jeremiah, I kind of had the inverse with him where at times I would feel like he was too perfect, which is an issue I do have with some romance heroes. They can feel too perfect. They don't seem realistic. They don't seem like a character that you can actually enjoy watching. They're just like a placeholder. But with that, I do think Lopez did a good job overall of constantly weaving in little moments of imperfections into his character where we can see like he does have his own traumas, he has his own things he's working through. There were a few offhanded comments here and there that would actually kind of hint at bigger issues that don't really even have a main focus in the story, and I liked that Lopez did that, but by the end of the book, I kind of wished she would have dived into those things, so Jeremiah did feel a little bit more like a built-out character to rival Alex's. So they were better foils to each other, even though like I already had a really good time with the characters that are established here and the dynamic between them, the way they play off each other. These two are very opposites attract, and I really enjoyed watching that unfold. I like how they grew to appreciate the differences that the other person had from themselves. The layers of tropes in this book is literally catnip to me. I mean, I really was falling in love with them by the end of it, and knowing what happens next since I read the second book in the series first. I love that like we get to see little bits of their happily ever after in Jillian's book also, so that was really great. Last thing, I'm so impressed at how Lopez managed to weave in Mexican-American history into the story. It's not the focal point, like it is not the main focus, but it is so inherently part of the story. I really enjoyed learning about how a community of Mexican Americans was established in Kansas. I really liked learning about how their culture in Kansas differs from Mexican American communities and other places. I felt like this was a great way for the author to kind of blend two things that it's very clear she cares a lot about into this really well done romance book. I really liked it. I really liked this. I can't freaking wait for the third book in this series to follow the last sister. I hope she is just as wonderfully unlikable as the rest of the family, and I am really intrigued to see like what paranormal element gets brought up there. I initially gave this like 4.5 stars. I think I'm gonna stick there. Like I said, I have a few issues with it, so I didn't quite feel like it warranted a 5-star, but overall, really good book. Highly recommend. One I have not seen anybody else on booktube talk about, so like if this sounds up your alley, please check it out. It deserves the love. All right, and on that note, that is officially it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me the rainbow emoji in the comments because it's perfect. I have links to all of my socials in the description down below. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!